Great. Well, welcome to, again, our first panel on how I went from careers beyond the bench. My name is Joanne. I use she, her pronouns, and I work within the Office of the Vice Dean Graduate Studies. Happy to be here with a collective knowledge of amazing folks throughout our time here today. To begin, I do want to acknowledge the land in which I'm currently on. So I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credits. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I will be sending out a couple of resource links for folks to have a look through afterwards as well, in order to better understand why we do land acknowledgements and additional resources to support you in your PD as well. And I will be including a particular link called Whose Land for you to learn more about the lands on which you're situated on, along with the treaties that govern them as well. So I do invite folks to explore that afterwards too. All that to say, a community is important to me, and knowing who is in our space is important. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to our panelists for them to introduce themselves. If you can introduce yourselves by your name, your role, what you studied, and perhaps your most recent bench work, that would be fantastic. So we'll start with Leo first. I think I've sent along the order for folks.
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Leo. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me today. My role currently is a product manager at a e-commerce company. So we use AI to shape how shoppers will progress their shopping journey. Pretty vague stuff, but we can go more into detail later. I studied chemical engineering at U of T, did my master's there as well. And my most recent bench work, not really a bio bench, but my work was mostly in silico. So we built mathematical models to predict drug metabolism, so somewhere at the intersection of biology and linear algebra. I guess I'll pass it to Yasaman.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Yasaman Delaviz. I'm an educational and curricular development specialist at York University. My most recent bench work would have been my PhD. So I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Toronto in material science and engineering, and I went straight into the PhD program in IBBME, Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering, which I believe maybe there has been a recent name change. I'm not sure. I will double check. Yes, there has. I see nods. Okay. And so that's where I completed my PhD in 2018. So it's been about 5.5 years since then. So my most recent bench work is a while ago, but I'm excited to share some of the insights I have from there and how I transitioned into a completely different discipline, you can say, or a different area of focus. And maybe I'll pass it on to Oluwatobi. I'm so sorry. I think I pronounced your name wrong.
No worries. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Oluwatobi Edun, and my role is I serve as a consultant at Deloitte in its risk advisory service or practice. And I consult and provide risk advisory services to financial services clients, and around the area of like digital transformation. So clients that want to move from old legacy systems to new technological solutions when it comes to their audit management or when it comes to their governance, risk, and compliance systems. So I provide risk advisory as well as project management or program management advisory services. And I studied chemical engineering at U of T, both my undergrad and also Master of Engineering. And my recent bench work was back then, which is a while ago, about 5 years ago. And I was working on removing vanadium from oil sands fluid coke. And so oil sands fluid coke is from refining bitumen or processing bitumen mostly in Alberta oil sands. So there's some vanadium which was considered waste that can be turned into wealth, and that was my recent work. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm the last person. My name is Karyn Ho. I also use she, her pronouns. I am currently the science communications lead at Vital Biosciences. We are working on a point of care diagnostics device to try to disrupt how healthcare is delivered, allowing removing barriers to people having diagnostic information by having ideally one of our instruments in every doctor's office so that people can receive their blood work at their first appointment with results ready and quantified in 20 minutes. So my role at the company, a lot of my job is science writing. I also have a degree in medical illustration, so they also let me draw. So if there's anything that needs to be visualized for, say, a patent application, if there are concepts that we want to be able to translate for potential investors, if there are video demonstrations that we need to provide for grant funding or again for investors, I'm involved in a lot of that. I work there part-time, and I'm also a freelance science writer for a nonprofit called Research to Reality. The last time that I did bench work was over 10 years ago. So during my PhD, I studied at the University of Toronto. And while I was there, I found out about this medical illustration program. It's offered at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and it's the only one of its kind in Canada. And it's a really interesting way to learn how to communicate science, how to build a story, and what makes sense in terms of the visual communication of the story and how that can raise the profile of whatever cutting edge discovery has been made.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, folks. Everyone was saying that it's been a while since you've done bench work, but the recall and how you explained your research studies and last bench research was really impressive, I must say. So thank you so much for the warm introductions. So our first question today, the main one is, how do I make the most of my engineering grad studies? Many folks here are balancing life obligations, bench work. And so do you have any recommendations around effective or useful resources or opportunities you leverage during your graduate studies? I'll pass it off to Leo and Karyn for your input first, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
I can go first, I guess. So just for context, when I was doing my master's at U of T, there were quite a few activities that I was involved in. So obviously, like, your prof might make you TA, but you also have your research you have to do, and then there's some extracurriculars. So I was involved in a music extracurricular as well as Biozone, which was kind of the student council for chemical engineering. And then on top of that, because we're sometimes very I'd say constrained by funding. You see, sometimes you have to get extra sources of income as well. So I was tutoring on the side as well. So I was teaching some students for the MCAT. So there was a lot of stuff that we had to keep tabs on and be able to make sure that you can know what you're doing every single day. So for me, what the biggest solution that helped me address all these different moving pieces was to just get really, really good at using a calendar. So it doesn't matter if it's like Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, or even, I guess, some people use Microsoft as well. But it's really important that you make sure everything is in a calendar, so you can just remember that there are things that you have to do and to just have it all in one place. And so some of the key I guess drivers for success for me was, one, you should make sure that all your calendars can talk to each other. This is super important. And I think, in my opinion, you should just have your base calendar. This is the one that everything just floats into, and then that's the one that you just have saved on your phone, and you can check there. So you can assign different colors to different calendars that you have, and that can help you see what you're doing on the day-to-day at a very good high level. A couple of other ideas here is, one, you should really prioritize for all of your activities, right? I think if you're doing your master's, obviously the education comes at the very high parts, in addition to family and making time for your other personal commitments. And then you can prioritize everything else out. So one thing that I did frequently was every quarter, I would just recheck my priorities to make sure that explicitly writing it out, 1 is this, 2 is something else, will help you know what is the first thing to drop if you don't have time for something. Couple of other tips here. One is for working sessions, make sure you block off that time so that you know that like, okay, I'm going to do this in preparation for the next item. Also building in like routines for work that you have very scheduled. So for example, if you're tutoring or if you're TAing on like Thursday mornings, maybe Wednesday night, you should just block out that time to do all your prep for the work in advance. That helps a lot in terms of just making sure that you save the time in advance before things get too hectic. And then the one last part is like when you're in the lab, like sometimes like you're super busy, but other times there are downtimes when you're running experiments or waiting for like incubations or things like that. So really making use of those little downtimes can be useful for just like squeezing out that extra like 30 minutes or even 2 hours of just work that you can get done there. So yeah, overall, like having a really good like calendar management system is, I think, really, really important. And it might take you like, 1 day to like set it all up, 2 weeks to get familiar with it. But really, it's like you take a step back so that you can go like 2 steps forward, right? So calendar, my go-to for how to improve your productivity in grad school.
Hey, Leo, I'm glad that you talked about time management because when I was in grad school, I definitely was not the poster child for time management. It took me 7 years to finish my PhD. But so I'll answer maybe the other part of the question, which was how do you make the most out of your graduate studies? And I really think that a very important facet of your graduate studies should be meeting people and building relationships. Because, I mean, honestly, I would say probably over 95% of the jobs that I have gotten after grad school have come through some kind of referral, whether that was through a faculty member or through other people that I did my degree with who, rising tide lifts all ships. So, everybody went out internationally, really joined various companies and various startups. And I freelanced as a science illustrator for many years after I graduated. And I worked for various hospitals, startups. I did a brief stint with CrossFit on the anatomy of exercise. And even my job currently at Vital Bio, those things all came from referrals. So not only does this really help you just get through your degree in terms of having great experiences and getting to know people, but it also just ripples into everything else afterwards and really helps you launch your career. I would also say that chairing a conference or at least going to a conference, maybe even a conference every year, super important, especially if you're interested in exploring options outside of traditional career paths. Just because you never know who you're going to meet there. And you meet so many different people who had so many different paths, ended up in really interesting places that maybe you would not have anticipated, and that could inspire you to look into a different career option.
Really great advice. I hope folks are taking notes from our panel members. Yasmin and go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could just add one thing, because what Karyn just mentioned really resonated with me. I also took 7 years to complete my PhD. But during that time, I did a lot of different things. I explored different avenues, essentially anything that I thought I was a little interested in, I went all out. And the one recommendation I would highly make, it goes back to what was just mentioned around networking, is really letting other people around you know what you're interested in, what you're willing to learn, and avenues you're willing to explore, because they will take the step for you, and they will support you, and they will, recommend you and refer you and let you know when an opportunity arises. For example, I developed a course at OKI University, and I taught it for 7, 8 years. But really the way I came about that course was because I had at one point expressed interest in teaching, to who I see as my mentor, actually, one of my mentors, a professor I had during my undergraduate studies, who I was fortunate enough to TA for. And because I enjoyed the TA experience, I shared that. And I said, you know, I'm really, really enjoying this and I want to develop a course. So I had an opportunity to support course development for his online course, which then led to some skill development, knowledge development around pedagogy. And then that referral came in. So you know, if I could go back in time, I would probably do more of that. I would let more people know, you know, the types of things I'm interested in, the types of things I'm willing to try out, because you never know who will send that referral for you. So don't be shy, really, really speak up. And the people around you are your best assets. Your PI, you know, the profs you complete courses with, they really can really help you with getting your career started. And most of my initial positions were through some form of referral. I will say that the position I'm currently in was a cold application. I did not know a single person at York University. So not saying that if you don't have the referrals, it's not going to happen. Similar to that at Seneca, it was a cold application as well. So it can happen, but for sure, especially in the beginning, having those referrals really does help. So just let people know what you're interested in. I think it's really impactful.
Oluwatobi, do you want to add in anything to?
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
sure. It kind of blends into the next question, but I wanted to say in full agreement with Yasaman and Karyn and Leo, you need to have that, you know, that base foundation of managing your time, but you also need to look beyond like what you're there for, which is, you know, your education degree. There are people around you that you can learn from, and you can volunteer for interests that you might have like an inkling towards, or you might see yourself doing it. Just volunteer and see what it's like. Because for me, that was one of my motivations. I wanted to go beyond just the classroom experience. Yes, I was going for like the emphasis in sustainable energy and emphasis in entrepreneurship, leadership, innovation, and technology. But there's so much that you can learn just beyond, you know, the day-to-day, like opening a book, studying. You can learn from working on like organizing a conference. Like I had the privilege to organize the Society of Petroleum Engineers North America Symposium. So those kinds of experiences grow your network, and they also grow your skills in terms of not just like, you know, classroom research bench skills, but also non-bench skills when it comes to working with people and creating something bigger than a team that you're working with, things that serve society. And so, yeah, go beyond, you know, your interests, go beyond the classroom, and you would definitely be rewarded for that because you meet a lot of people, and there's always going to be network effects when it comes to connecting across different interests as well, which is how I found myself at Deloitte. So, yeah.
Amazing. I think this threads nicely through our next question, as you mentioned. So I'm kind of curious to hear from our panel members, what factors should they consider when pursuing non-bench work? And to expand on that, were there specific factors that made you decide to pursue non-bench work? And were there skills that you brought from your bench work to non-bench work? And happy to hear from all two. If you would like to start, Toby, if you'd like to start first, or Yasmin as well.
Yeah, for sure. I can go ahead and start. So, first of all, you start from where you're at, which is whether you're studying chemical engineering, material science engineering. What are some of the key trends in industry when you do see yourself working in industry, or if you're working in research? Look ahead for what's coming. What are the innovations, and see how you can connect yourself to that, whether it's through volunteering opportunities, conferences that you attend, or even some programs that might be offered. Like I mentioned, the elite emphasis and sustainable energy emphasis. Like from those courses, I knew that blockchain technology was going to be the technology of the future, and I could lend to the course that I was a part of that introduced me to that topic, to sort of look ahead at, you know, what companies like Deloitte might be looking for, like when it comes to financial services clients. I know that blockchain technology is not something that's, you know, adopted massively right now, but there is growth and adoption in that space. And so that gives you an avenue to pitch yourself to employers when you are in an interview and you want to show them that you're thinking ahead, that you're not just focused on the technologies of the past or what's happening currently. You're thinking about how you can innovate, how you can help the company that you're going to work for grow beyond their current scale. And so that was one of those things that sort of led me to pursue non-bench work. And for me, the second piece would just be working with people. I'm a very collaborative person. I don't like to stay in my own bubble. I like to learn from different kinds of people. I guess from my passion of playing soccer and having traveled around the world, I was born in Nigeria, moved to the Netherlands, and then came here to Canada. Working with different people from all different backgrounds sort of spurred me on to look beyond just my interests and see, okay, I might not know too much about this area, but let me see what I can learn. And then you'd be surprised that it could lend you opportunities in different areas, whether it's like teaching. Like I never saw myself as a TA during my undergrad, but I found myself teaching a first-year engineering course, APS 100, and also an engineering business minor course as well. So those little bursts of raising your hand, trying to see what is out there and testing the waters will definitely open doors for you. So keep a lookout for those opportunities. Pass it on to Yasaman.
Thanks, and maybe I'll just kind of build on what you said, because again, that resonates with me. Perhaps this wasn't something I did as actively as I should have during my graduate studies, which was to really look at where the world was headed. What were the new pieces of technology, or what were the skill sets that I would need? And during my graduate studies, for example, I had, a lot of downtime, as Leo mentioned, because I did a lot of HPLC. So you would inject a sample, you wait 20 minutes, 30 minutes, wait for your results to come before you can inject the next thing. And while 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes may not seem like a lot of time, it actually is quite a bit of time. And if you could optimize and use those times to learn a new software, a new tool, a new skill set, it really makes a lot of difference. I do recall that when time came to apply for positions, a lot of positions were saying, you really, they require Python, for example. And I appreciate that there has been changes and it's been embedded in the curriculum a bit more, but at the time when I was completing my PhD, I did not have an opportunity to take a course on Python. And the last programming course I had was in first year. And so I felt like an entire area of discipline wasn't available to me right when I had graduated, which could have been. The same way that I learned how to create videos for an online course or how to design an online course, because I had expressed interest in that and pursued that. And so I had spent a lot of time developing skills in pedagogy, in curriculum development, and course design, and video creation. And so I was able to leverage those skills for my first career. But when I think back, I could have probably learned Python. I could have probably learned Power BI, which is highly used in industry right now for data analysis. I could have probably learned a lot of these tools, which you can really do, and I continuously do even right now. So while, in my current position, I don't necessarily need to use Power BI every day, it is a tool that I've started to learn right now because I do see how I could use it going forward. And so, what I really would recommend is to consider, what's needed right now, but also think about what might be needed in a few years, and try to continue to learn outside of your day-to-day. It's very hard to do, especially if you're in a PhD program, because you're so focused on your project. So my project was on dental materials, wet lab. I did a lot of chemistry synthesis, a lot of polymer synthesis. And so, video creation or data analysis using Power BI. These were data visualization using Power BI were not my typical day-to-day. I did a lot of NMR or a lot of Excel work, as most graduate students do. But there's always an opportunity to learn. And I when time came after graduation, those that were able to find really unique industry jobs, I understood because they had spent some time learning some of these tools and softwares that are available. So, if you do have downtime, as Leo mentioned, utilize them, learn a new skill, and not just right now, but as you go forward, because industry changes, needs changes, and even your job your career aspirations changed with time as well. So perhaps that's one thing that I would say would really help you transition from bench work to non-bench work, is to expand your skill set, your knowledge base. And you don't need to do full programs in these types of areas. You could complete a LinkedIn Learn course. There's so many open access resources available. For example, Microsoft Learn has an entire pot of learning available that you can use, and you can keep those certificates and include them in your resume. Sometimes it helps, right? So just explore what's available to you and continue to learn, and not just in one area, which I'm sure most people are focused on, which is fantastic, but also expanding outside of that.
And around for question, Leo, Karyn, any thoughts around that question?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of what we've been discussing today has gone back to like pay attention to the things that you pay attention to. Like if you figure out that you're interested in something, lean into it and look for opportunities there. I remember when I was finishing my PhD, I came to this realization that, I had learned so much doing it, but that I never wanted to do that type of work again. And one of the things I realized was that the thrill that some people have in terms of being at the bench and being the first person to witness something, being the person who discovers something, was never the draw for me in terms of being in engineering. And for me, it was really about learning about tons of new things and trying to piece things together, figure them out. And so that was kind of how I got into science communication, is that, instead of laboring over trying to make a discovery over, maybe 10 years, it would be, every time I met a new client, I would be learning about something totally new from the ground up and trying to figure out how it worked and how to describe that to somebody. And one of the interesting things in working with clients is that they often say that there are things that they're like, oh, I never even thought about that. Like there was this giant gap in my understanding. But then when you're trying to like draw it and trying to animate it and trying to bring in all the characters and show how it works, it sometimes even makes it, really obvious that there was a missing piece. And so it's like a really interesting collaborative process where I get that part of my interest fulfilled without actually being the person at the bench.
Yeah, I can throw in my 2 cents here as well. I think when Yasmin said that like she wished she should have looked at Python, like I wish I'd done the same thing. Like my master's, I was coded in MATLAB. But then, when I actually went to industry, I'm like, oh, like nobody actually uses MATLAB because it's very expensive per license and it's a very academic thing to do. Right. So like in retrospect, I wish I had used Python, and the learning that came out of this is really like you should try to be preparing yourself with the skills that are needed in industry, as opposed to like well, especially if you're trying to move into industry. If you plan on staying in academia, that's a whole other story. And I think another part of this is really just like figuring out like what do you want to do with your career. And so there's this book that was recommended to me from a mentor a long time back called What Color is Your Parachute? And this book is really amazing because it helps you walk through in an exercise of like what are the factors that matter the most to you in terms of you as a person, as a career. And it really helps to like just like kind of narrow down a little bit the possibilities so that you can actually focus when you're going into your job hunt. So I think if anyone is like in a crossroads situation where they don't know what's going on, I really highly recommend the book. I think it's like $30 or something, and there's like a fun worksheet. And so you can do it over a week and then have really good clarity afterwards.
Amazing. And I think it is available through our YouTube library as well. So if folks have access to the library, I think it's also available there. But I've taken on the name of the book to send as a resource afterwards. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one last thing before perhaps you may want to jump into the Q&A, because there's a great question there. the other piece that I think would be really helpful is for you folks to sit down and start to make note of everything they know, articulating all the skills you have. And it's very easy to not recognize the skill sets you have and to just wait until you're updating your CV or your resume. I would say start sooner, and speak to someone that's not from your discipline. Okay, don't speak to the person sitting beside you in the lab to share about kind of what you think your skill sets are. It's not very helpful. You both speak the same language and you both think the same way. So find someone from another discipline and just sit down with them and say, throughout my grad school, these are the types of things I did, and I think these are the skills I have. What do you think? Which of these do you think is most relevant? I think a lot of times we underestimate how much skills we've developed and how much we know. And especially being in grad school, you spend so much time being focused on your project that you forget that while you're completing your project, you're developing so much more. And it's the so much more piece that's going to help you actually get your first job or your second or your third. So speak to people from outside of your discipline more often than not, because it's very helpful, one, to understand where you're using perhaps jargon that most people don't understand, but two, also to understand how things could transfer to other areas, because a lot of the skills you do acquire are transferable skills.
And thank you for playing the Q&A question that just came through. So it looks like we have a question for Karyn. I wonder, it's a great question too for the breakout room session. If you wanted to briefly address the question. So the question reads, I have a passion for drawing, and it's great to hear that career exists in science illustrations. Do you think it was necessary to have an extra medical illustrations degree, or can you advise another way to pursue a path in science drawing without an extra degree? And then a question around future connections on LinkedIn.
Yes, please add me. Anonymous participants. Or any participants who want to ask me more questions, please feel free to add me on LinkedIn and start a conversation. In terms of, okay, so I think that the degree that I got in biomedical communications is called a Master of Science in Biomedical Communications. It's really interesting because you get to do like the full human cadaver dissection with the medical school. There are all kinds of once in a lifetime opportunities from being in that program. And you get to learn from people whose job it is to really make you into a storyteller, not so much. I mean, you learn a lot of technology as well, but that's secondary to like learning how to tell a story. So it's really useful in that sense. You can get a really great network that way. But do I think that's the only way that you can get into science communication? Definitely not. There are definitely tons of ways to get into it. And even, I mean, if you look at the animation / VR sphere, there are a lot of people who don't even have science degrees who are doing things in this field. They're, making the 3D models, or, doing rigging so that it can move, or building on a game engine so that it can make your 3D models into a surgical simulation. So there are lots of different pathways that you could take. And I would say that the main thing about going into this type of field, so you do need to, if you want to do production work, if you want to be the person who's actually making drawings, making models, making animations, then you definitely need to learn some of the technology. But you could be learning that technology from many different places. It could be somewhere online. You could go to art school even, I mean, there are degrees at like Sheridan or Seneca where you could be learning just straight hard skills in animation and modeling. But also one thing that I think that a lot of graduate students don't do enough, and I definitely didn't do enough, was to look at other people's career paths. And this is super transparent on the internet now, because you can go on LinkedIn, you can find somebody who you admire because you think to yourself, wow, that person has an amazing job. I would love to have that job. How did that person land their job? And then you can look at, which degrees they have, what other certifications that they've gotten. What did they do with their summers? What did their career path look like? And even without having to set up sort of an informational interview, you can look up, a dozen people who are in the field that you want to be in and see all the different ways that they got there. So I would recommend that everybody check that out as a resource more.
Thanks so much. And I think there's going to be probably more follow-up questions afterwards as well in the breakout rooms. So we have one final question for all of our panelists, and it's regarding transitioning from grad school into work. So I'm curious to know, what does your organization's hiring or recruitment practices look like? And when you're transitioning beyond the bench, were there particular skills, values that you emphasize in your applications to industry? Leo, you're welcome to start first.
Yeah, sure. I actually have a lot of thoughts on this because currently I am looking for new roles as well. So I think first of all, organization hiring practices just depends on the organization. It's not really useful there, but in general, the market's pretty bad. We put out a application for a product management role in the US, and I got 1,300 hits in 3 days, most of which were unqualified, but it's really bad out there right now. So that being said, I think because of the sheer volume of applications, it's actually better to try to network and just reach out to people. I've seen success with connecting people with similar school. So like someone who went to U of T or someone with a similar company that you've maybe shared or internet before. Those are really, really helpful. And really try to connect with people who are a little bit more senior, like in a management role or higher, because people who are junior, they don't really provide that much in terms of actually having power behind their words when they do forward that recommendation. So when you network with a senior person, like obviously they know you, you make a strong impression, and then they can directly send in direct referrals. And so it means a little bit more than just some analyst who's been working there for 7 months. Now, regarding the skill side, I think like I already talked about using like learning the skills that are relevant in industry. But some of the things that I think people should focus on is the transferable skills between science and industry. So one is project management. So I know a lot of people are often juggling like multiple manuscripts or they have different projects, and you have to like really lead these with your own initiative and show some level of independence. So project management is really, really key. I think people can find a PM role like somewhat easier because of the experience. The second one is analytical skills. So this is like being able to dive deep into the data, to drive the insights, and then tie that back to some kind of a business decision. I think Yasmin mentioned Power BI. Tableau is also a really big one, but really like once you have like the skills to do things in Excel or Google Sheets, like you can apply it to wherever you want. It's really about like, can you find some kind of surface level idea and just drill really deep until you actually get to that nugget. And then the last one here is really working with cross-functional stakeholders. So at the lab, like for example, you might work with like procurement, you might work with lab techs, you might work with your supervisors, who's essentially the business side of the lab. And you also have your peers as well. So being able to work with people from different backgrounds with different goals in mind is really helpful for demonstrating that you can work in a team and be very successful there. So like as a personal example, so my master's, I actually use it to say I have some level of bio knowledge, I have some level of coding and research ability. And that's like a little bit more abstracted from the pharmaceutical models, math and stuff. On the teaching side, that's more I highlight the mentorship and interpersonal skills. And then for some of the other projects I do, I use it to highlight my leadership, initiative, and ability to do things independently. So it's really like looking at what are the experiences that you had and then abstracting like what are the generally applicable skills that are useful for industry, and then using that for your interviews instead of saying, I did this very specific thing with this protein that we purified. So hopefully that's helpful.
I think I'm also on this question, yeah. Okay, so wait, let me remind myself what the question was. Hiring practices. Okay, I would say that if you want to be in a non-traditional role, you have to be prepared to advocate for yourself, because if it's so non-traditional that it took you a while to even have heard of it, then the chances are good that other people also will not have even given it any thought. So I'm going to tell you a story about how I got hired at my company, Vital Bio. they had been looking for months for somebody to come on as their science writer. And through a referral, I was introduced to them. It was the strangest thing. I didn't even send in an application, but they read my PhD as like proof of whether or not they thought that I was a good writer. So that was really interesting. That was the first time that I had heard somebody had actually looked that up to see what kind of writer I was. But I remember interviewing, and they were describing to me the role. And I basically said, no, I'm sorry, I really don't want that job. And it was really, they wanted someone to just come in, write grant applications, and that was not why I got into medical illustration. And so, you know, I talked to them about how in my wildest dreams, it'd be so great to like run a science museum and get to bring these, bring together, you know, like specimens and physical objects and be able to tell a story and to a really big audience. And I showed them, you know, my demo reel and how animations could really bring concepts to life. And they sort of said, you know, like before we met you, we didn't even know that people like you existed. People who were engineers and scientists first, but who had all kinds of creative ways to communicate information. And so I think that there's like an element there of education for potential clients or potential employers, where you have to sort of, you know, maybe read a job description and then imagine how you would bring assets that could make that position like even more amazing. Amazing for you because then you get to do the kind of work that you want to be doing. Amazing for them because it opened opportunities that they weren't even thinking of. So I think, yeah, if you think that it's cool and amazing, then there's probably a market for it, but be prepared to advocate for yourself.
That's great. I 100% agree to that. I think what I could perhaps maybe just add is, and this insight comes from being in the hiring position as a hiring manager, is something I didn't know. So when I graduated, I assumed when I looked at a job description that I had to check off everything to be able to apply for it. And I quickly learned that, for example, for my position, it said PhD in education or related discipline. Anything is a related discipline. My PhD was in engineering, and so I still applied, but I wasn't very hopeful, thinking, oh, but my PhD is in education. But now as a hiring manager, what I've learned is I actually don't want to hire someone that hits everything 100% because they're going to get bored in no time. And so if they hit 70% of it, that's a great candidate for the position because there's room to train, there's room to learn, there's room to stay engaged. And so the one other recommendation I can perhaps make is, you know, when you're looking at job descriptions, don't be discouraged if you don't hit every point. Sometimes as a hiring manager, it's not only not a negative thing, it could actually be to your benefit because you can now express your interest in learning and wanting to grow, and how you can see yourself learning what's missing, or how you can complete what you're lacking and what's listed in the job description. So don't be discouraged. Don't, when positions are posted, we typically think about what we think is an ideal candidate, but we don't always know. And we get candidates that surprise us and teach us how we didn't really understand the position as well as we thought we did. And we didn't even understand our needs as well as we thought we did. You know, there's way more that we could be doing with this position. And so for sure, share your insights, even if you go into an interview and it's not the ideal interview. It's okay. The experience of being in that interview is a lesson. I will share with you that before I interviewed for the position I'm currently in, I actually interviewed for a very similar position in another faculty. And it was for a shorter contract, and the position wasn't offered to me. They wanted to hire someone else, but I did actually ask, can I have a follow-up feedback? And I had a chance to speak to the hiring manager and ask kind of, you know, where do you see me improving? Because I am interested in this type of position. You know, I want to know what can I do to get that extra edge to get it the next time it comes around. And it turns out that I was just a very strong candidate, and it was just my luck that they also had another strong candidate for the position. But he informed me that the similar position is being posted in another faculty at York, and because the interview process went really well, that he would put in a referral for me. Even though he hadn't worked for me, he could say, this person interviewed very well. We do think there's a lot of potential. And it happened, and I went for the second interview in another faculty, and I did get the position. So it wasn't that I didn't get the position because I wasn't a qualified candidate. It's really important to recognize that sometimes it's just, chance, luck that another candidate has applied at the same time as you, who perhaps maybe had something that was of interest to them at the moment, to not be discouraged. But also remember that you don't need to have 100% of what's listed to apply for a position. If anything, find positions where, you have 75% of it and apply for those, and explain how you're excited to learn more. And so maybe I'll pass it on. Who's next? Yeah, go ahead.
That's a great point, Yasaman, in terms of like looking at roles that, have skills that you already have, or maybe there's some room for you to grow. I would also add in there that look for roles that are adjacent to, your background as well. You'd be surprised, like, there's room for you to grow, and they're looking for people who show that interest, from that base education level. So in terms of hiring and recruitment practices, so at Deloitte, we do come in for networking events on campus. We also have campus ambassadors. So what you can do is on LinkedIn, you can check campus ambassador at University of Toronto, and you will find some people who are students at the University of Toronto who are advocating for Deloitte on campus, and you can meet with them, network with them, and they can connect you with senior managers or leaders in the practices that you're interested in. So that's one way you can get connected with Deloitte. As Leo mentioned, connect with people that you see on LinkedIn that are senior leaders in the area of interest that you want to pursue. The market is tough. So what you want to do to stand out is make it personal, show that interest, go the extra mile. And even if you go through the interview process and you do get rejected, still show that interest by following up on the email. You'd be surprised how many opportunities are left at that doorstep by just walking away from the rejection emails. So I had a point when I was applying and looking for roles. When I didn't get the role that I had applied for, there were other positions when I responded to that rejection email. So just wanted to put that out there as an avenue to pursue. But in terms of going through the interview process at Deloitte, we do have some case interviews. So what you want to bring up is your, as Leo mentioned, interpersonal skills, project management skills, and you also want to show your ability to tell stories. So in business, we typically communicate with data-driven insights to drive a business decision, but you want to tell the story at how you arrived at whatever decision that you're proposing. And so I know there are some courses in the MH degree, especially in the elite emphasis, that do help in that storytelling aspect. So look for courses that help you and to grow in that area. And I believe there might be a Toastmasters as well on campus. So that would be a great way to beef up your storytelling skills. And I think, yeah, just showing your interests, connect with people through referrals, and that's a great way. And yeah, keep connecting with people because you never know where that opportunity will come from. So those are the things that I did emphasize in my applications, like my ability to, meet the certain areas of the job description. And I think on a personal level, just, connecting with people, sharing things that you connect on, whether it's soccer, whether it's, things outside of work that, you can build a connection on and try keep on doing that. So, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Leo. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot to talk about this, but like I guess I have a course on business analytics. If anyone's interested in like just watching through it, let me know. It's on Udemy right now, and just send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll send you a code to get it for free. But It's basically like SQL, Excel, and Tableau, how to use them. So if you're interested in like analyzing data and stuff, let me know.
And if I could just add one more thing. So I'm in the Faculty of Health, and so health is important. And so I'm going to advocate for health as much as I can. We talked a lot about skill development courses, networking, a lot of really hard things you can do to improve your chances for a great career. But I think a part of everything is the work-life balance. And I think when you're in grad school, it's easy to lose that balance a little bit where you spend so many hours in the lab. You know, I do recall being in the lab till 11 p.m., midnight, even if I had an experiment that had gone over. Like, I do remember those days. And, you know, I'm sure that many of you have experienced very many long hours in the lab. But one thing I learned, and I only recently learned this, is how important it is to bring other elements that bring actually joy in a healthy way into your life, which part of that is exercise, and making time for exercise, and even scheduling that into your calendar, as was mentioned earlier, because it's very easy to kind of skip on some of these things that are very important for the longevity of the quality of your life and your health, which, you know, I don't think we do enough of that, and we don't advocate enough for that during grad school, but it is so important. And the sooner you start to bring that into your life, the easier it becomes. And the more routine it becomes that, you know, once you do enter your career, now it's just another piece that's like brushing your teeth in the morning, you know? And so do it as soon as you can, create these little bits of opportunities where you can help yourself have a better work-life balance, because, you know, especially for grad students who have spent so many hours working on a project in a lab, it's very easy to overdo it and, you know, become a workaholic in a way. But if you have these self-discipline practices that are good for yourself, it really does help, because your productivity will go up as well. You know, since I started exercising, I've noticed I've had greater productivity. So it will benefit you. You may not realize it early on, but it will benefit you in the long run. And so as part of Faculty of Health, I'm going to advocate for that and say, please consider bringing in some form of health-related practice into your day-to-day lives. The sooner you do it, the better.
And I think that's a wonderful transition to say we are gonna be going into networking. So like as folks are transitioning, take that stretch break. I'm gonna pause our recording. Righty, so thanks again to our panelists for spending your lunch hour, it looks like for most folks, with us. And I know a lot of our attendees today found it super helpful. So my last question is just any final words of advice you have for our graduate students or postdocs as well as they head off into their next journey. And anyone can start with this one.
I can start. So from what we've learned today, and also from the conversations I've had in my breakout rooms, I think it's important not to be discouraged, especially in the market that we're in. And all you want to do is put yourself on the front foot. How can you get yourself as close as possible to that next opportunity that you're looking for? And how you do that is by positioning yourself that in a way that demonstrates that you are the candidate that they're looking for. It's looking at advancing your skill sets, looking at adjacent industries that would help in terms of highlighting your base, your core foundation, but also showing that there's room for you to grow in whatever capacity or role that you're entering into in industry. I think from the changes that we're seeing in industry, there is a need to bridge multiple technologies and multiple skill sets together to make organizations resilient. And so to put yourself in the best light, volunteer for opportunities that are adjacent to your core education, build your skill sets, scaffold yourself with skills that will help you on an interpersonal level, storytelling level, and also build your network. This is a time for you to grow your network and increase your chances for referrals, and keep reaching out and keep learning beyond your zone, because the world is at your feet, and university is a great launching pad for that. So yeah, that's what I would say. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll go. This came up a couple times in my breakout room, which was sort of, I'm interested in this non-traditional field. I don't have all the skills. So how can I demonstrate that? And I think this goes back to, like volunteering for something, is that you don't have to have the skills to be able to like try something, try to make something, build your online presence, have a website, or you could even use LinkedIn for this, to link out to a document like a PDF or something like to your Dropbox. But like try to build some kind of case study or portfolio piece or something that you can add, that somebody would be able to look at. Make sure that it tells something about like your interests. It tells something about your thought process, how you arrived at a solution, joining like a hackathon or just deciding, I'm going to illustrate this for my thesis or somebody else's. Or, like I'm interested in working for a science museum, so I'm going to create a concept for an exhibit. Like these are all things that would be able to show somebody, not, one time I was in a co-op position that I was so surprised to get, because I did not think, I saw who else had applied to it, my fellow students, and I thought there was just no way. And I remember at my exit interview that they said, yeah, we read people's applications, we read all the applications, and there were people who definitely had a lot of experience, but it didn't really seem like they made the most of it. Like they hadn't seemed to have learned from it. And I would rather work for somebody who is like really keen, doesn't necessarily have the experience, but has like that drive and that mindset, and who has taken the experiences that they did have and made the, maximize the impact of that. So yeah, I would say, don't be afraid that you don't feel like you have every possible skill, but if you can go that one step further to demonstrate that you really want to be stepping away from sort of where you're at in this direction, can be a really powerful thing to show a potential client or potential employer.
I guess maybe I can go next. I guess something that did come up in our session was around, job titles. We are getting more and more creative as each day goes by and creating very different, unique titles for different positions. Don't be surprised that there may be job titles out there that are what you're looking for, but it just doesn't sound like it's what you're looking for. So there was a great suggestion earlier, look at people's LinkedIn pages, kind of look into what those position titles are. And then another question that came up was around, what if you don't have a set of skills as mentioned or experiences, what to do? Contract opportunities do exist. It may be for 10, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. It may not be full time, but they're a great way for you to build those experiences and add things to your resume, which can make a lot of difference. So do consider and pursue those opportunities. Reach out to folks where they may have such opportunities available within their units. And I mentioned earlier, sometimes I get a resume, I may not have an opportunity right now, but 2 months later, my colleague wants to hire someone for 20 hours a week. And I let them know that there was a candidate 2 months ago that expressed interest, I think had the skill set. Do you want me to reach out to them and ask them for their updated resume and forward it your way? Things like that do happen. So do let people know, express your interest, and, bring in good, healthy lifestyle habits, because that does help. And just be open to different opportunities, and the last piece is learn as much hard skills, technical skills as you can on your own time during all those wasted hours or wasted minutes. If you can utilize your wasted minutes, you'll get so much more accomplished in the day.
Yeah, I didn't have too much else to add, but just good luck to everyone as they look at this new chapter of their journeys.
Well, again, thank you to our panelists, and I think it's fantastic that we're in the shared space around thinking around careers beyond the bench, and folks are here from higher ed, consulting, business optimization, medical communications. And I think it really demonstrates the different ways that you can move beyond your degree, beyond the bench as well. So huge thank you to our panelists. I'm going to invite our attendees to use the React feature to do a hand clap, or if you're on camera to clap your hands as well for our panelists. Thank you again so much for your time. I know I took a lot of notes that I'll need to come back and revisit to format, but again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon hour, if it's afternoon for you, with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.